Welcome to the AI Safety Podcast, where we introduce you the latest research.
All right, so today we're going deep on open source vulnerability scanners for LLMs, not just hypotheticals. We're talking about tools that are being used right now to find weaknesses in these AI systems.
It really is a fascinating area. We actually have a study that compares 4 of the leading scanners: Garak, Giskard, PyRIT, and CyberSecEval. It's like a peek behind the curtain of how LLM security works in practice.
Yeah, exactly. And this is crucial because LLMs are being integrated into everything. So if they're vulnerable, the implications are massive. I mean, we're talking data leaks, manipulation, misinformation, all amplified by the power of AI.
Right, and that's where LLM red teaming comes in. It's like ethical hacking, but for AI. Researchers are simulating attacks to find these vulnerabilities before the bad guys do. And these scanners we're talking about, they're essentially automated red teamers. They use what are called attacker-evaluator pairs. So the attacker crafts a prompt to trick the LLM into, misbehaving. And the evaluator judges whether that attack was successful or not.
So let's get specific here. What kind of attacks are these scanners actually launching?
Well, there are 2 main types: static attacks and LLM-based attacks. Static attacks use predefined prompts. And LLM-based attacks, well, the prompts are generated by another AI. And it gets even more complex when you think about how they judge whether an attack worked. Sometimes it's just simple string matching, looking for certain words in the response. But they also use LLM-based evaluators, which can analyze the response in a more nuanced way.
So it sounds incredibly complex for something that should be a simple pass-fail, like, did this attack work or not?
Well, you would think so, right, but it's much more nuanced than that. You see, LLM vulnerabilities fall into multiple categories: jailbreaking, context manipulation, gradient-based attacks, even attacks targeting code generation. Different scanners are better at detecting certain types of vulnerabilities than others.
Okay, well, let's get into the specifics of each scanner then. What about Garak? What makes it stand out?
Garak is really a powerhouse when it comes to attack coverage. It has over 20 attack evaluation pairs, and they're primarily focused on jailbreak attacks. And importantly, they're all grounded in published research that adds a layer of reliability,
So when it comes to the number of attack strategies that it tries, Garak is leading the pack.
Exactly. Plus, it offers really detailed reports in JSON and HTML, and it can integrate with NVIDIA's NeMo guardrails, so you can test how well your LLM defenses are holding up.
Sounds impressive. Okay, what about Giskard? How does it compare?
Giskard is all about customization. You can tailor attacks based on the LLM you're testing. You can take into account things like its intended purpose and any safety requirements that are in place.
So Giskard is it's a bespoke tailor, right? Crafting targeted attacks, while Garak is more off the rack but covers a wider range of sizes.
Oh, I like that analogy. That's a good way to put it. And Giskard also has great reporting. It gives you a user-friendly HTML report that even highlights the reasons why an attack was successful.
Interesting. All right, next up we have PyRIT. What makes it unique?
PyRIT is the ultimate do-it-yourself option. It gives you complete control over the instructions for the attacker and evaluator LLM, so you can create very specific attacks, but it does require a lot of expertise to use it effectively.
So this is one for the advanced users, the ones who are comfortable with prompt engineering.
Absolutely. It's not as plug-and-play as Garak or Giskard, but that flexibility is unmatched.
And flexibility is always valuable when you're trying to probe into unknown territory. Finally, we have CyberSecEval. What's its specialty?
CyberSecEval is the code security expert. It focuses on finding vulnerabilities in code that's generated by LLMs. Things like insecure coding practices that could lead to exploitable weaknesses.
So this is the scanner for developers and cybersecurity professionals who are worried about the security of LLM-generated code.
You got it. It uses static analysis tools and a database of known insecure code snippets to evaluate the output.
Okay, so we've got our 4 contenders: Garak, Giskard, PyRIT, and CyberSecEval, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. But how did they actually perform when put to the test? I mean, the researchers ran them against some real LLMs, right?
They did. They tested them against 4 different LLMs: Meta's Llama 2, Cohere's Command R, OpenAI's GPT-4o, and Mistral AI's Mistral Small, to see how effectively they could uncover vulnerabilities. And the results are pretty interesting.
Well, I'm dying to hear them. Which scanner came out on top?
When it came to attack coverage, Garak was the clear winner. It had the largest variety and volume of attack instances, and its attacks were generally very effective at triggering errors in the LLMs.
So Garak lives up to its reputation as the attack coverage king.
It does. However, when it came to evaluator reliability, things got a bit more complicated. Remember, this is AI trying to judge other AI. It gets very complex very quickly.
Right.
And to understand how reliable each scanner's evaluator component was, the researchers did something really interesting.
I'm all ears.
They manually analyzed over 1,000 attack responses. To create a baseline for comparison, they essentially acted as the ultimate judges, determining whether each attack had truly worked or not.
So they create like a ground truth data set to test the accuracy of the scanner's evaluations.
Exactly. It was a really clever approach. And using this manually labeled data set, they were able to calculate what's called the margin of error, or MOE for short, for each scanner's evaluators.
So this MOE, this tells us how often the scanner got it wrong, like misclassifying an attack as successful or unsuccessful.
Precisely. And what they found was that all 4 scanners had some degree of error, but some were definitely more reliable than others.
So give us the scoop. Which scanner had the most reliable evaluators?
PyRIT's LLM-based evaluators had the lowest margin of error, so they were the most consistent in correctly identifying whether or not an attack had actually worked.
That's fascinating. So the do-it-yourself approach actually led to the most accurate assessments.
It did in this case. But it's important to remember that both static and LLM-based evaluators have their own challenges. Static evaluators, the ones that rely on string matching, can be too simplistic. They can miss subtle signs of success.
I can see that, especially if an LLM is cleverly worded to avoid using those specific trigger words.
Exactly. LLM-based evaluators, on the other hand, can be a bit unpredictable. They can get distracted by irrelevant details or offer strange justifications for their assessments.
Ah, so they're a bit like human judges then, prone to biases and inconsistencies, even with the best intentions.
That's a great way to put it. And this unpredictability makes it difficult to fully trust their judgments, even if they are statistically more reliable on average.
It sounds like judging the success of an attack is a really tricky problem in this space, and it really highlights the need for more robust and reliable evaluation methods. What did the researchers propose as next steps to tackle this challenge?
They have a few key recommendations, yeah. But maybe we can save those for after a quick break. We'll be right back to delve deeper into the researchers' findings and what they mean for the future of LLM security. Stay tuned.
Sounds good. So before the break, we were talking about that challenge of reliably evaluating the success of attacks on LLMs. I'm curious what the researchers suggest for addressing this.
They had a few key recommendations. First, they argued that we need a standardized benchmarking framework, not just for the scanners, but for the evaluators themselves.
So like a universal scoring system. So we can actually compare apples to apples when it comes to LLM security.
Precisely. It would help ensure that everyone's using the same criteria when assessing LLM vulnerabilities.
Makes a lot of sense. A common language for these complex issues. What else did they propose?
They also highlighted the need to improve the evaluators themselves. They suggested a hybrid approach that combines the strengths of both static and LLM-based methods.
So leveraging the simplicity of string matching, but also incorporating that higher-level understanding of LLM-based evaluators.
Exactly. It's about combining the best of both worlds to create more reliable and robust assessments.
Sounds promising. Any other recommendations from the research?
Their final suggestion was to establish industry-wide quality standards for these LLM vulnerability scanners.
Ah, so setting a bar for how accurate and reliable these scanners need to be considered trustworthy.
Precisely. Think of it like safety regulations, but for AI tools. This would help ensure that organizations are using tools that actually work, and that we're all collectively pushing for higher levels of LLM security.
Seems like a critical step, especially as LLMs are becoming more and more integrated into sensitive applications.
Absolutely. We need to be just as rigorous about the security of our AI systems as we are about the security of our traditional software and hardware.
Speaking of rigor, let's go back to the comparison of those 4 scanners we talked about earlier. Aside from evaluator reliability, were there any other key findings that jumped out from the research?
There were. One of the most interesting observations was the variation in attack success rates across different LLMs.
So some LLMs were inherently more vulnerable than others.
It seems that way. Certain LLMs showed a much higher susceptibility to certain types of attacks. For instance, they found that Mistral Small was generally more resistant to jailbreak attacks compared to Llama 2.
So the architecture of the LLM itself plays a role in its overall security.
It definitely appears so. This finding really underscores the importance of considering security from the very beginning of the LLM development process.
Makes sense. Don't just bolt it on as an afterthought. but bake it into the LLM's DNA right from the start.
Exactly. And this is where those customized scanners like Giskard can be particularly valuable. They let you tailor attacks based on the specific architecture and intended use of the LLM you're testing.
So you can probe for the vulnerabilities that are most relevant to that particular LLM. So we've got the architecture of the LLM impacting its security, and we've got this ongoing challenge of actually evaluating the success of an attack. Sounds like LLM security is a pretty multifaceted problem. Where do we go from here? What are the next frontiers in this field?
Well, one area that's ripe for exploration is developing more sophisticated attack strategies. Right now, a lot of the attacks used by these scanners are fairly straightforward.
So we need to up our game in terms of how we're probing for weaknesses.
Exactly. We need to think like attackers. Imagine attacks that leverage the LLM's own capabilities against itself, or attacks that exploit subtle biases in the training data.
Kind of a sobering thought. It's like we're in an AI arms race, with attackers and defenders constantly trying to outmaneuver each other.
It is. And as LLMs become more powerful and more deeply integrated into our lives, the stakes are only going to get higher.
Well, that leads perfectly into the final part of our deep dive. We'll explore the broader implications of this research and what it means for the future of LLM security. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring the world of LLM vulnerability scanners, and it sounds like we're in for an AI arms race as these systems become more powerful. Yeah, it's a race that has implications for all of us, you know? LLMs aren't just theoretical anymore. They're being used in everything, from chatbots to medical diagnosis tools to even self-driving cars.
Which means the consequences of a successful attack could be really serious. We've talked a lot about the technical side of LLM security. But what about the human element? What role do people play in making sure that these systems are used responsibly and safely?
That's a great point. Technology is just one piece of the puzzle. We need to build a culture of security consciousness around AI. And that starts with the developers who are actually building these systems.
Things like promoting best practices for secure coding, rigorous testing, a mindset that anticipates vulnerabilities from the start.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond developers too. Policymakers, regulators, even everyday users.
That's a pretty wide net. What can everyday users do to actually contribute to LLM security?
Well, awareness is a big one. Just understanding that LLMs can be manipulated and that the information they provide isn't always accurate.
So approaching them with a healthy dose of skepticism, critically evaluating what they say, not blindly trusting everything they generate.
Exactly. It's also important to be mindful of the data you share with LLMs. Avoid giving them sensitive personal information or confidential business data unless you're absolutely sure about the security of the platform.
It sounds like it comes down to digital literacy, applying those same critical thinking skills and cautious behaviors we use online to the world of LLMs.
That's a great way to put it. We need to educate ourselves and each other about these technologies so we can use them safely and responsibly.
Speaking of education, let's circle back to those 4 LLM vulnerability scanners we discussed. If an organization wants to actually implement one of these tools, how should they decide which one is right for their needs?
It really depends. Their specific use case, how much expertise they have in-house, the types of LLM applications they're working with. For organizations with diverse needs, maybe limited AI security experience, Garak and Giskard are great starting points.
Those are the more ready-to-use options, right? With comprehensive test suites and user-friendly interfaces.
Exactly. Garak gives you that broad overview of potential vulnerabilities,
Right.
while Giskard allows you to tailor your attacks.
And then for those with more specialized needs or greater technical expertise, there's PyRIT and CyberSecEval.
Right. PyRIT gives you that unmatched flexibility. And CyberSecEval is perfect for anyone worried about the security of LLM-generated code.
No one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to LLM security. You need to choose the tool that aligns with your needs and your risk tolerance.
Couldn't agree more. And as the field continues to evolve, we'll probably see even more sophisticated tools emerge, each one addressing specific aspects of LLM security.
It's definitely a dynamic and rapidly changing landscape. Makes it even more important to stay informed and adapt to new threats as they arise.
Absolutely. We're just at the beginning of this LLM security journey. The choices we make today will have a huge impact down the road.
Well said. And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive into LLM vulnerability scanners. Hopefully you found this exploration insightful.
Thanks for listening. And remember, LLM security is everyone's responsibility. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay vigilant.
Until next time on the deep dive.